You remember the old adage, the older generation wondered if you could revive General Leo. The younger generation was concerned with finding Mew under a truck. Welcome, everybody, to today's episodes of the Tomodachi Bros podcast. I am your humble co-host, the Hipster Snack, and with me today, unsurprisingly, are, of course, Ditaku and Clockwork.
Unsurprisingly.
You guys have been in most of the episodes this season, so I think most people expect that much.
Sort of.
Maybe. I can only be found if you go backwards through the door 300 times.
Yeah. That's true.
I am a very secret character.
He is. He's very difficult to unlock, and his weapon is wonky until you get a handle on it and level it up a few times.
My scheduling has just been thankfully been very, very just been very, very good for podcasting. Surprisingly, I should say, because usually it's like I'm sitting here going through my schedule, and I'm like, nope. Not gonna make this one, or even this one. Yeah, my gosh!
to say nothing of how often we get Cog or Noodle, or dare I even suggest a Ranger and Lounge Lizard up in here.
Well, I mean, Cog and Noodle are in a completely different, time zone. A Ranger is on a completely different continent, so I mean.
And according to Cog, Lounge Lizard is still riding his dinosaur around and not willing to throw in with us cool guys just yet.
So you know what needs to happen?
Maybe. I was going to say maybe we're not cool enough for him. He is the best character.
I mean, you got me there. There is something to be said for that.
Everybody at home, we're starting it's called a fundraiser for the Tomo House. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're not doing that.
No, I didn't know Hipster Rat was here. Okay. All right.
See, and the thing is what we're going to do is then we're going to have, really, really sad, soft music. And it's like, for only 15 cents an hour, you too can feed these sad hipsters.
Please, we're addicted to pizza, and we don't know how to find one of those in the wild.
You need to get the pizza trees, obviously.
That's where I've been going wrong.
The pizza root?
Yeah, you need to get pizza seeds. Clearly.
Yep, no, that checks out.
Oh, boy.
So today, we're going to be kind of revisiting two other topics that we've touched upon in episodes earlier in Season 3. We talked about heroes and villains. We did it very broadly, and we had a lot of interesting and insightful comments, I think. And I thought that it might be really interesting to narrow down our focus. So I proposed we talk about the hero of kindness trope and the noble villain kind of characters. So I think I'm going to open the floor. Who wants to start us off tonight?
So we were talking in chat before Tataka got in, and I said, my brain, when he said the hero of kindness, my first thing I went to was Steven Universe, because I was like, because he doesn't fight most of the time, he just talks. But then we were talking about, but this is also a world where everybody's emotions are on like a silver thread, and I could break at any moment. So is he actually a hero of kindness or a master of manipulation?
I would argue it's the latter. And here's the thing. I watched Steven Universe for a while, because at first I was like, oh, okay, it's like this cool space opera thing. They're like these weird aliens, and they have this interstellar war, and mankind's caught in the crossfire. That's an interesting concept. I can work with this. And then the longer it went, the more I noticed some interesting patterns. Like, around the time they literally disabled a doomsday device that had apparently been used in several other instances of totally demolishing planets, and they disable it by asking it nicely not to. Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah. By the way, the for those of you OG, most excellent gentleman tier, level, or I guess gentle lady or gentle viewers, that is the entire joke behind Hipster Snack's entire "lol kill yourself" thing in the very, very first April Fools.
Yep.
That's the joke.
That is literally the joke, is I just ask them to defeat themselves, and they just do.
Yeah.
The thing there is, like, the Steven Universe world is written where everyone's kind of this emotionally volatile kettle that's just looking for a reason to explode in one direction or another. And they'll either get... Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the main problem stems from I believe it was written as a space opera at one point, because there's a lot of adventure, there's a lot of like really, really nice set pieces they set up, and then it kind of veers as you start getting farther and farther into it. The issue as you're talking about the bomb that Steven asked to not explode, I think it was the beginning of the arc where, like, okay, so are we just gonna have him talk everything down at this point? Even think like, because the gems, if I remember correctly from the story, are like, are older than the Earth itself, or older than, like, because
they're a really old race, but they've been around for a while, apparently,
who are set in their ways for a millennia, and most of them, just from a conversation, can be just completely turned the other direction. They have like nothing when it comes to any kind of sort of like integrity or anything like that of themselves, like,
because there is nothing easier than convincing an old person to change their mind about something. Am I right, guys?
I think I don't know. I guess I don't know if I know you guys probably don't care, but people who haven't finished it, the ending and the ending, big old spoilers. Jump back to 20 seconds. Jump forward 20 seconds if you don't want to hear it. The end is the big bad bosses, the diamonds. He literally talks down and nothing happens. That is it.
So it's every bit as disappointing as I speculated it would be after he talked down the planet nuker.
Yes, they find out that he is actually the diamond that went missing, or the son of the diamond that went missing, and everything is cleared up. It is totally fine. That is it. And I was like, no, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah, because, this weird militant space conquering race that has no qualms committing massive xenocide on huge galactic scales are just totally going to be like, oh, no, fam, we're good. We're just going to stop. We'll just stop.
Or just completely take him by his word that, he might have done something awful to that gem, because he only has the gem. He is not the same.
Yeah, person. He's not the same entity.
So I might be, as some would say, I might just be taking just the surface point of it, but that's what I've taken from it, and it wasn't satisfying in any regard whatsoever.
I'm glad you had the strength to see it through, because I didn't. Because these are concepts that can be done wrong. And they can be done wrong very, very, very easily, because it requires a level of maturity to understand how these concepts can be done well. So yeah, Steven is very manipulative, and the people in his world seem to have IQs hovering at about room temperature or lower, measured in Celsius.
And I do want to say that Steven is, as portrayed, is generally a good person, but because of how young he is, he's not portrayed as knowing exactly how much power he actually has when it comes to his words or his powers in the beginning. He does mature in a way, which, like, there is like a progression of story and maturity that he gains, but there's never like a realizing what kind of power that he has with his words, or how it kind of damage it can also do to people.
Which the show would never explore anyway, because, like, as I recall, there's an episode where they actually celebrate Steven's birthday, and he's actually, like, way older than you might expect. He's like 14 or 15 or something.
I don't remember that.
Yes,
actually,
which is
he's at least a young teenager.
Yes, which is kind of a problem I have with the series. Is he acts like he's like maybe 10, and yet he's supposed to be like 14, 15, and yeah.
Yeah.
Add in the fact that the art is incredibly inconsistent, and it just, I don't know. I couldn't even watch it as far as the professor did.
And I couldn't finish it. So that tells you what we're dealing with here. Now, if you want an understanding of how this concept can be used well, let me introduce you to one of my favorite meta series, the Ultraman series. One in particular, Ultraman Cosmos, whose title among Ultras is, in fact, the hero of kindness. Because he would never, he had a hard time destroying monsters that were unambiguously evil. Because the entire time while he was fighting them, he was like, there's got to be something. There's got to be something we can do that doesn't involve snuffing their life out. That's not right. I don't like doing it. There's got to be something that we can do. But when push came to shove and there were innocent people behind him, he was like, I'm going to plant my feet and I'm not letting you take another step forward. And I will crush you if I have no other choice but to do so. You see, people, writing good characters requires you to put thought into what it is that character believes in. This comes up a lot in this podcast, right?
Yeah.
I think, as I said, I think this kind of loops back to the earlier point about the fact that the writers writing these characters, first off, have very, very sheltered lives. Secondly, are kind of skewed in the fact that they all seem to just live in a very sheltered kind of bubble. And they just kind of interact with all the like-minded people, and they all just live in this one, not geographic area, but kind of like they all move in the same stratas.
Right.
And they don't ever seem to like even brush up against anything that even like pushes them like either emotionally or mentally. They just, or even physically, they just never seem to like get any blowback. They never seem to actually ever have to pause and stop and be like, wow, maybe I'm the thing that's wrong here. Maybe I need to get better and grow. And it's like, no, I'm as good as I'm ever going to be. And, the world needs to bend around me. Whereas, I honestly always think about it in the fact that the hero has to kind of be like the willow tree, and that, it's like the world is always going to push on them, but they got to, it's all about seeing how they will adapt and overcome.
Right.
So
yeah, that's the part of the hero's journey that makes them compelling.
Yeah, so that's also kind of why I really don't like the entire like Mary, the boss, the girl boss Mary Sue's that we see now, where they're like, oh, I was always perfect, I just didn't know it. And it's like, no, see, I don't mind having a female protagonist. The issue I have is the fact that it's like all you do is just act haughty and smug, even though, there are people who are far more knowledgeable, far more talented in these situations. Yes, you might have the talent, but you don't have any information or context. And yet somehow, these other people are like, wow, Mary Sue, you're so strong. Like, okay, yeah.
I think the context, I think more of the context being is that talent can get you so far, but without the skill to back it up after a while, it will only carry you so far. And they seem to be lack the willingness to learn and to reinforce the talent that they have. No, is that what you're going for?
Are you talking about the writer or the character?
See, that's where I was like,
either.
Yeah. Okay, so because I went from writers to the girl boss character protagonist. So
I was kind of going with the character, but I was assuming that if the writer has talent but is unwilling to learn from what is good writing, what is bad writing, that would also kind of add to that effect as well.
That would apply, certainly. Now, here's an interesting thing, because you actually touched upon something that a couple of years ago, Cog and I got into a discussion about, and he actually had this really profound point to me. You see, Cog is a music guy. He is our music guy, basically. He does the opening theme for the podcast. He did the original version of the SNEC channel opening. And of course, we have a Ranger who's also a music guy. But Cog said to me that when he and I were in high school, he actually was learning the trumpet. But it was later he discovered that his love was the guitar. And I made an aside. I was like, dude, you are really talented. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm not. And I'm like, are you being self-depreciating, or do you have some grander point at play here? And he's like, listen, I'm not naturally talented. I sat down and I taught myself how to do this, and I studied it because I was passionate about it, and I got good by doing it. In most cases, that's how it's going to be. There are, of course, the rare instances where someone just seems to have a natural knack for something, and they just kind of fall into whatever category of specialization that happens to fall in. But for the vast majority of people, they're taught the skills that they ultimately get good at. And the things that they use the most are the things that they will excel at the most.
This is another one of your bugaboos there, Professor, the entire genius versus hard work.
It is. It is, because I think there's a really profound point there. Because there are going to be people who occasionally have that, once in 1,000 years flash of lightning kind of natural talent. But the truth of the matter is, if they don't use that talent, if they don't exercise it, if they don't refine it, they are going to lose it, or worse yet, squander it. And this ties both into the talent of the writer and the talents of the character. You could be born with a natural talent for being a heart surgeon, but if you're the type who's squeamish and faints at the sight of blood, you're never going to refine that talent because it runs counter to your natural instinct. It's like, so what you get good at, if you're, let's say, this hypothetical person with the potential to become a surgeon, instead goes into accounting because they're really good at math and they practice numbers all the time because of their job. They are going to lean more and more and more into that specialization the more they refine it. This is why training arcs matter. They may not necessarily be the most interesting part of the material, which is why a lot of the times in shonen anime they happen relatively early on, because you got to show a reason why the character gets as good as they get. Or you're Akira Toriyama and you just pull something out of thin air because, well, Vegeta didn't have time to do a whole bunch of push-ups after the Ginyu Force stuffed him originally. I don't know, too on the nose?
I was going to say, or the fact that they keep coming up with contrived training mechanisms and everything. I mean, it's like, this machine can take 1 hour and turn it into 1 year of training. It's like, that is
the hyperbolic
insane.
time chamber.
Yeah, there's that, and I mean, like, idea wise, I'm like, that's a cool idea, but that's it is also still pretty, like, on the nose. Like, oh, we don't want to go through an entire training arc again or something like that.
The hero doesn't have a year to spare. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we have to.
The villain's coming tomorrow. How do we train a lot in that time frame? Mm-hmm. Part of that, it gets, again, talent of the writer, but. Like, here's a classic example, and I know I harp on this a lot, but I was forced to see Last Jedi, so you guys are going to suffer as I have suffered. Luke Skywalker is a good example of this, because there is a pacing. The very first thing this doofus does when Obi-Wan hands him his lightsaber is he points the business end at his own eyeball. Like, did you guys notice that? He holds up the lightsaber, and the first thing he does is he points where the blade comes out at his own eye.
I actually did not.
Yes, it's the first thing he does. It's the first thing he does when Ben gives him the lightsaber. But then you see that there's training. It takes him time. He starts understanding the concepts. He learns how to swing the sword. He learns how to actually use the Force. In fact, he's kind of bad at using it at first. He has to stand on his head to make a couple of rocks float off the ground. Meanwhile, Yoda just walks up, raises his hand up, and Luke's entire starship just rises out of the muck like it's nothing. So you see, this is where you could be. This is where you are now, you stupid goober. But
yeah, I mean,
he gets that time.
Even his dad, who was considered like a super hyper prodigy, trained for like 10 years before he could actually really Force good.
Yeah,
as we say.
exactly. And then the Disney trilogy happened, and Mei Ray Su shows up, and she's just like, "Oh, I have this lightsaber. I'm immediately good at everything involving lightsabers. Oh, I'm on the Millennium Falcon. I know my way around it better than Han Solo because I poked at it for 30 seconds. Oh, I'm Force sensitive, so therefore I can use the Force better than all the Jedi Masters ever because I'm just naturally so good." And you wonder why people got mad at that? Anakin, who was a little kid, I believe he was 9 in Phantom Menace, they said, oh, he's probably too old to go through a proper training regimen at this age. Because they usually have to start so young because there's so much to learn. They're like, oh, it's kind of a liability. He was too young, but Rey, who was already an adult, just mastered it. Just instantaneously. Zero effort on her part.
Okay, to play devil's advocate, I hear it, said, and this might be, just the old Republic stuff, but I'm kind of inclined to agree with it, is the fact that a lot of them starting so early wasn't so much the physical or the actual training, but more of the kind of indoctrination into their weird Zen mullah, mindset of, oh, there is no emotion, there is only the Force, that you harped on about earlier.
Right.
I was going to say, yeah, the as Sataku was saying, is that they because it's supposed to be no emotion, only clarity.
There is no emotion, there is serenity, there is no death, there is the Force.
So if you're not trained with that in the beginning, then it's really hard it's harder for them than it would be for someone who trained from it pretty much at birth. But it's also in a sense that it's one of those things where it's as you get farther in the series, you realize that it kind of mattered less and less because good people are going to do good things and bad people are going to do bad things or whatever. I mean,
ostensibly that hinges on the fact that Star Wars is an unambiguous good versus evil story, and at its core, an action story. So yeah, some things are going to fall by the wayside. I get and respect that, but the narrative arc of these characters matters. In fact, in any other universe, Mei Ray Su would have actually made a fantastic villain for a character like Luke Skywalker. Now, hear me out. Here's another good example. Actually, would be Phoenix Wright, because the main character is an emotionally bumbling idiot who barely merited his place in the bar, which he does twice, by the way. God knows how. But every prosecutor they put this man against is some kind of prodigy that has set records or holds records or is responsible for some kind of grandiose feat in the legal world. And it's this, you see this bumbling idiot who tries really hard because he believes in people versus the genius talent. And you see that constantly. I've actually just started the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, and immediately it's already rearing its head. You get I'm the super genius prodigy who I was in 7th grade and I was a prosecutor who was putting away massive criminals. It gets progressively sillier as the franchise goes on if they keep having to raise the stakes. So imagine having, Mei Ray Su, the absolute genius, who picked up a lightsaber once and could outduel even the most established dueling lightsaber wielding, cool guys from space and beyond. And then you have, the hick from the moisture farm, who's a total nerf herder. And he's like, I'm going to try really hard because I'm a plucky guy and I believe in people. That would actually make a more compelling hero-villain dynamic. I think so, at least.
No, I kind of agree. kind of looping all the way back to our very beginning. Honestly,
Right.
I think the entire the best way really to kind of present these characters, either really honestly, either either your hero of kindness, as you call them, or honestly, the sympathetic villain, which I have to say, I have thoughts on that. I think that both of them are good, and even better if you kind of have and you kind of brought this up, having a kind of a foil. So if you have the hero of kindness, you have some other viewpoint character who isn't that, who's, probably kind of a pragmatist, or even, someone who's kind of amoral. Because, and I mean, here's the thing, new writers, you don't have to have, sympathetic villains. You can have villain protagonists. The protagonist just is the character that you're following in the story. It's not actually, supposed to be someone who's like morally good. I mean, Lord knows, Lord Byron did all sorts of things with characters who, had really interesting stories to tell, but they had good intentions, but, just trying to get the end of their goal basically made them the villain. And that's kind of the tragedy of watching someone who's really, really good intentions, got, a really good goal, but, man, all these orphans keep getting in the way. My, monster truck to deliver, the toys to the children.
I would read that story. I would read that story with sadistic glee.
And so, it's and that's kind of the thing with the especially sympathetic villains. And I really like your example that you brought up earlier. You see, we had like an entire conversation about this earlier today. And I really wish we had recorded it. But you brought up Final Fantasy VI, and Final Fantasy VI is really good. And it's interesting because it starts out basically with a trifecta of villains who are orchestrating the entire through line of the plot. You have Emperor Gestalt, you have General Leo, and you have Kefka, the court wizard. And so two of these guys, spoilers for a game that came out in 1995, are just unambiguously evil. And then there's General Leo. General Leo is a nice guy. He is one of those rare individuals in this world who doesn't immediately resort to magitech, who doesn't, immediately resort to war crimes and poison and abusing his power and in station in order to do things. He actually cares for the common soldiers under him and tries to treat them as well as he can.
Yep.
So it's all the more tragic when basically his trust is abused and he is ultimately betrayed, by Kefka.
I mean, it starts with the first time you see him. He is attempting to march the Imperial soldiers on the kingdom of Doma. And he's like, Doma is known as an impenetrable fortress. Charging their gates continuously will cause our guys to just get slaughtered. It won't be worth it. And will cause more tragedy than we'll resolve by taking it. So the Domans are like, aha, we can outlast you. And Leo's like, well, I need to think of some kind of strategy. And as he's thinking on his strategy, a message comes, and they're like, oh, sir, Emperor Gestalt requests your presence back at the capital. And he's like, okay, that puts Kefka in charge. He's like, Kefka, don't immediately resort to war crimes the instant I'm out of eyesight. And General Leo then gets immediately out of eyesight, and Kefka's like, well, time to start committing some more crimes. And just poisons the only water source that Doma has available to it. And wouldn't you know, it must have just been, water hole o'clock, because everyone in Doma starts dropping like flies. And the only survivor is Cyan, the head samurai and knight in the service of the king of Doma. And yeah, that's kind of how we're introduced to Kefka. He's just like, yep, that just happened.
Well, okay, to be fair, he does show up earlier, and he does do some pretty evil things up to that point.
That's true. He set Figaro on fire.
Mm-hmm. And he attacked Narsha and got a lot of people killed.
Yep.
But yeah, he that was a lot of, this is a war, there are going to be deaths on both sides, and there are. But yeah, this is basically him just being unambiguously super evil.
Yeah. And he's just like, it really goes downhill from there, because Kefka is just like, oh, those war crimes are like potato chips. You have one, you just can't stop with one. You gotta start racking up some more. Mm-hmm. Including the bit where when they're at the floating island, they're like, aha, we have the warring triad here. We have the source of magic as it's understood in this world. And now we shall be invincible. And Kefka's like, oh, my emperor, you misspoke. You mean I will be invincible. And then he just murks him right on the spot, just stabs him to death.
You know how I said that I would kill you last? Yes, I lied.
Oh, the irony. And then Kefka literally destroys the entire world.
Yeah. Technically speaking, in Final Fantasy VI, the villain wins. Even though the heroes take him out later, he got what he wanted. He wanted a world of chaos, and he made it.
He made it all right.
He succeeded.
He's the one who ultimately kills General Leo. And it caused a lot of consternation back when Itaku and I were small children in the black and white era, riding our dinosaurs to school uphill both ways in the snow. And
don't you remember back then when, we had everything kind of bounced back and forth in time with some kind of, very, very jovial jazz song?
Oh, and, of course.
There was always people at the malt shop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times.
Indeed. And, at school, Final Fantasy, what we thought was 3 at the time, was a hot game. And we were like, dude, General Leo is super cool. And you actually get to play as him in one spot. And he has his own unique character ability called Shock. Now, how exactly it works and what exactly it's supposed to do is unclear to me as casual observer. I'm sure someone's dissected the game code and looked at it. But we're like,
I was about to say, we should probably ask a ranger. He knows a lot of the behind the scenes stuff on that.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get some insight on that. The whole thing was, it's he's so cool. And Celis was a general in the Imperial Army up until she was like, no, I'm not committing war crimes. And they're like, well, we'll throw you in a dungeon in South Figaro. And then Locke's like, hey, you're pretty. You want to go with me? And she's like, well, I've gone for worse before.
Well, okay. I mean, you're going to die against the next boss if I don't come with you. Wait, what was that? Nothing.
Nothing. That's not important right now. By the way, I have a dead girl in my basement. Weird, right? Wait. It makes sense in context.
Wait, Celis, you have it?
No, Locke has the dead girl in his basement.
Hey, what?
Oh, yeah, you haven't played Final Fantasy VI. This makes sense in context, I swear. No, I'm not getting into it right now. I'll explain later. But the whole thing is, we saw Celis defected from the Imperial Army. Celis has a unique character ability, and now this General Leo guy, he's super cool. He's understanding. He's going, oh my god, the Empire's doing all this horrible, horrible, evil stuff, and I can't abide by that. That's not okay. So we're like, he has to be playable. There has to be a way to save or revive General Leo. No, there isn't. But it caused no shortage of people trying to find a way, or some dungeon, or some optional side quest, or something that would save General Leo.
Yeah, bear in mind this is like not too terribly at long after the time where you literally have a time travel game where you go back in time, fight the King of Demons, and then the King of Demons goes, "Okay, I'm sorry guys. I know, we had this long back and forth, but the giant space bug that's going to kill us all, we both need to team up for this." And you just get him in your party.
Yep.
So I mean,
anything was possible.
Bear in mind, this is the kind of the landscape of things back then.
And the internet was in its prototypical form. We didn't have convenient resources where every game released on the market has a guide that's the size of a dictionary available to us. A lot of what we had to figure out was very much trial and error and word of mouth and the odd occasional, cool kid with a magazine subscription.
Yes, magazine subscriptions, the greatest of luxuries back in, the old black and white times.
Yeah. I still have my Nintendo Power and Game Informers in my closet.
Yep. Yeah, and so this was a big deal because General Leo was so aligned with the player's interests, and the fact that he died in a really tragic way because Kefka the Clown just basically backstabbed him at the last minute, right when it looked like Leo wanted to throw in with you. So like you're suddenly very compelled to be like, hey, wait a minute, this guy's cool. This guy wants to be on our side, and that's the power of that virtuous villain, where he's like, yes, I'm on what is ostensibly the enemy's side, but I have my reasons. In fact, another really interesting iteration of this in a more modern Final Fantasy context is one Gaius van Baelsar. And I know this is going to ruffle some feathers from some of you babus, but I know the 1.0 content doesn't exist, but it's very well documented. So, read up on it before you start jumping up and down and getting your knickers in a twist over Gaius. Because I've seen already way too much of that on social media. Gaius was always the virtuous villain among Garlemald. But even back in 1.0, he was opposed to Operation Meteor. He was like, guys, if we blow up Eorzea, we have nothing to rule over in the aftermath. Eventually, these people are going to be citizens of the Garlemald Empire. It's a bad idea to murder them all. But as we would later learn, basically all of the Garleans are being manipulated by Ascians, and Ascians, what's one genocide more compared to all the others that they've casually committed?
As you pointed out, war crimes are like Pringles. You can't just eat one.
You gotta have more than one. Can't stop it.
And which is weird, honestly. Honestly, the only time I've ever seen opinions on Gaius is, a lot of people wearing, programmer socks with, kitty cat headphones going, ooh, woo, get daddy Gaius, ooh, woo.
No, I saw a whole bunch of people who had clearly not any broader understanding of the character. Because when they released the gem weapon series of raids, there was this whole outcry, oh my god, he's such a bad guy. How dare you try to make him anything like a good guy? He's super, super, super evil. It's no, actually, from the entire time when he first showed up, in fact, in 1.0, he actively helps you and helps you undermine the Garleans' efforts. He's very much, from the beginning, been a very level-headed and compassionate man. He knows that the Empire is probably overstepping its bounds, but it's his homeland, it's his people, it's his countrymen, and he's not going to turn his back on them, but he does want them to go about it in proper fashion. He holds them accountable, and while he has his number of beefs, and he's very happy to enumerate them in the MSQ roulette, he's there going, don't kill them. We want to rule over them, yes, but don't kill them. That's dumb and wasteful, and you don't have to do it in the first place.
Hello and welcome to my TED Talk on why Reddit atheism is to best stores and your, love of the 12 is cringe and painful. Also, I drew this diagram of you as the soy jack and me as the Chad.
That means I win. And let's not let's not ignore the fact that so we're still in spoilers, by the way. That warning has already gone live. So if you guys are not prepared, you do so at your own risk. In the most recent raid series in Endwalker, it kind of proves him 100% right. Because the 12 are just like, oh yeah, we're just dudes. We're just like random people who happen to be friends with Heidelin back when she was Venonat.
Venonat.
And then when she evolved, when she evolved into Venomoth, and she was just like, hey, you guys want to be gods? And we're like, yeah, sure, what the heck, why not? Which also kind of contextualizes a lot of lore bits where it's like, oh, Halone is the daughter of Ralger. It's like, what need does a god have of a Dateru? And it's like, yeah, there's your very simple answer, actually. They're just people who happen to ascend, which is apparently just something you can do in this universe.
And a little bit more context, they did ascend, as Sneck says, but they were morphed by their, what's the word I'm looking for? By their skills and what people had saw of them. Kind of like how you give whenever, I guess, in certain RPGs and everything, like D&D, when you pray to a god, you give the god power. They're morphed by the power you give them by your thoughts and prayers to them when you believe they were gods.
I mean, to give it probably even closer to what Sneck would understand, it's like in Fate, when people think about heroes, it will actually change the way that heroes are. For instance, Vlad Tepes was a guy, but because people, associate him so much with the legend of, Dracula the vampire, Vlad Tepes, the hero, actually takes on vampiric attributes. Oh.
Yeah, that's the basic thrust of it. But yeah, like, Gaius not only is completely justified, and like so many people were so salty about the weapon raids. I'm just like, yeah, he was never an unredeemable villain, and then Endwalker proved him to be totally correct.
I mean, there are so many other legates that you could, level that at, like the White Raven, for instance.
Yeah.
No, I am never, ever, 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 ever forgiving Square Enix for that, by the way. I'm not talking about like, oh, how could you? She was my waifu. No, how could you? That was an awful raid series.
It's a lot better now, to be fair.
Yeah, yes, but still, I mean, I went out of my way to do it just so I could say I did it, and even then, I'm like, I appreciate it more for the context it gives me for like, this is what was going down back in 1.0 times, rather than like, oh man, that was a good experience, and I feel so much, better for having done it.
No one says that Coils of Bahamut is a good experience.
Yeah, I was about to say, this isn't like a near collab raid sequence where I'm like, wow, that was really hard, but I feel like a lot more fulfilled for having done it. Also, the music is really good. Also, I gotta say, the raid, even though it was really hard, was actually really fun.
Meanwhile, Coils of Bahamut is, oh, thank God we could have done that unsynced, so we were all level 80 when we did it.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, hey, if you don't kill me within a certain amount of time, I'm just going to keep dropping meteors on you. And it's like, how did people do this at level 50?
With a full party and a lot of frustration. Yeah.
I mean, we had a full party and we still struggled with it.
Well, yes. Yeah, there's a lot more irredeemable villains. And okay, here's a weird one where it's almost the opposite. Because for some reason, someone on the Stormblood writing staff just really liked Xenosia Galvus, who was the most boring and uninteresting villain in all of Final Fantasy XIV. There is literally nothing worse than him. And he just kept showing up and kept showing up and kept contributing nothing to the story. And this, oh my God. Like, if you want an irredeemable character, like, there you go. The random orphan stomper himself, who just does not get the message that, you know, sorry, buddy, we need to advance the story, and your mere presence prohibits that from happening. Worst character in Final Fantasy XIV, hands down. No one comes close.
You know, I just find it funny too that, you know, it's like, oh yes, by the way, I too am also a chosen. How did you do that?
Not important.
What? Yeah, it's like you just come back from the dead, and he's like, "How did you do that?" I just did.
Okay then. I mean, I always kind of assumed that was just meta knowledge held by the player, but what do I know?
Oh, no, Professor. Don't you know when you start abusing meta knowledge, you can go one of two ways. You can go the Oblivion way, which is good, and it makes the game better, or you can go the Undertale way, which is not good.
Which is just when the writer is really, really smug about it.
Yes. Which just kind of goes back to my entire point of metatextuality. It's just cancer.
It is.
And it's bad. And yet people keep doing it.
In fact,
and it's bad.
In fact, you raise an excellent example of a terrible example, because the core mechanics of Undertale, if you might think, oh, well, you know, if you befriend all the monsters, you're kind of being a hero of kindness. I disagree. Because here's the thing. You're not really talking the monsters down. You're just doing very silly actions and making really, really cringe references to a frankly overhyped webcomic series. Like, guys, I hate to break it to you, but it's not good. It's not good. It's not
Sweet
good.
Bro and Hella Jeff is good, though.
Oh, no, it absolutely is. Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff was the best thing that came out of Homestuck. So then in this game, you're just kind of going through the motions. And like, oh, well, this species of monster likes it when you do the silly dance command. So you do the silly dance command. And they're like, oh, whatever. And then you get to spare them. And you're such a good person. I watched a speed run once. And he's like, yeah, you literally never have to do that unless you're going... Like, you only have to do that with certain boss encounters, and even then, not really. Because the optimal strategy for doing the, like, quote-unquote nice route is to run away from every encounter. It's way more efficient. And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess if my enemy just chose to turn tail and run every time I encountered him, yeah, I guess I could say he never lifted a finger to harm me, but in order to actually have the power to be a hero, you can't be that level of weak. If you're just a weakling, then that's it. You're impotent. If you have the power to kill someone and not to use it, you're a pacifist.
Actually, I think that's the very definition of virtue. Is, you know, if you have the capacity to do something and yet you restrain yourself. But, I mean, yeah, it's like kind of, you know, I mean, for instance, in a game I really enjoy, Megaten 2, or I suppose I should say, rather, SMT 2, because there is actually a Megaten 2, and this is not the game I was referring to, but SMT 2, where my boy Aleph can, you know, wow demons with his amazing breakdancing skills. You know, that's very funny, you know, when you're negotiating and you're like, hey, check out this cool dance I can do. And, you know, then you get, hot damn, hee-ho.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. SMT is supposed to be taken seriously because they literally will gouge your throat out if you give them the opportunity. So Aleph doing something that random simply to assert dominance on them is inherently a funny thing to do because it's so unexpected.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like when everything is just so gosh darn quirky and whimsical, then yeah, it ceases to be really novel or interesting. And yeah, then honestly, really, I feel bad because I get the sense that Toby Fox could have done something really thought-provoking and interesting, but he just decided to make memes. So,
yep.
Drug.
Because when every single character is that aggressively quirky, then none of them are. It's just, oh boy, I wonder what this character's wacky, zany quirk is. Yeah, no. Guys, seriously. It's, like I said, it's a concept. To make a kind hero, the hero has to have the ability to be unkind, or even incentive to be unkind. Let's be real here. The final boss in Undertale has a basement full of dead children. Like, I think that's incentive completely sufficient to genocide them all. But the genocide ending isn't an ending. It's just the game getting bored of itself and stopping.
Yeah, honestly, you becoming a demon lord, taking all the energy of the monsters and then ascending to the surface and starting to kill the humans is an interesting idea, but they don't even go that far. It's just, oh, thanks for, gathering all the energy, and then they just kill you. And it's like, okay, that's, wow, I can't even, we can't even have a battle of demon lords, these two people who have just decided, and then I chose violence every single time. That would be more interesting than, hey, I'm the quirky, skeleton man, and I'm actually really, really hard. No, you're just annoying.
You're just another aggressively quirky character. And that's where it defangs the entire notion, because it's no longer, oh, am I going to be kind or am I going to wake up today and choose violence? Because the choice is basically made. You don't get a story if you choose the latter option, and choosing any level of neutrality, no matter what degree it is. Like, actually, I forget who suggested it, but I read somewhere online where someone is like, what about a self-defense ending? What if you deliberately spare or run away from any monster that is physically incapable or unwilling to hurt you, but only kill monsters that can actually have the potential to kill you? The game never explores that avenue.
No, they don't, because it's the old-fashioned, adventurers are murderers because they're going around just killing things. And it's like, yeah, that's a thought that TSR had back with Planescape. Excuse me.
To say nothing of the fact that the reason violence is the primary form in action games is because violence enacts a significant, meaningful, immediate change on your environment. It's primitively cathartic because, wow, wacky woohoo, pizza man, go fast, go sword, go brr. It's satisfying. That's why most action games are violent. You don't need a psych degree to understand this.
Now you're just now I'm just trying to imagine like a Devil May Cry, like debate team game where you're like, I'm gonna go spectacle fighting for using my words and trying to respect my opponent.
Capcom did that. It was called Phoenix Wright.
No, Phoenix Wright is just Phoenix Wright is basically just 90s point and click games, but for ADD people.
Fair enough.
No, I'm talking about like basically you have to stun lock people with like your filibusters, or like try and create awesome combos using your eloquence. But
I would pay good money to see that put to actual game form.
But yeah. So, anyways, honestly, on a certain level, I feel like Undertale is kind of like Evo Search for Eden, and that's a deep cut right there.
Yeah,
it's an interesting idea, but the execution is really bad.
Yeah,
and never mind the fact that the more we have kind of dug into Undertale as a game, like the actual nitty gritty mechanics of the game, it's like it's not coded particularly well. So
I mean, it was made in Game Maker.
Hey.
I'm willing to give him a little bit of slack since Game Maker was kind of designed with 2D platformers in mind.
I mean, hey, I'll say this. At least it's on brand for, him being like, I desperately want to make another Mother game. Because Mother, none of those were coded particularly well either.
Also that. I mean...
Also... Oh. No, I mean, just as an aside, every single indie game developer, you need to go actually and, like, play Mother, because I get the sense that a lot of you guys don't actually play Mother, because Mother, like the first game and the third game are like slogs. It's only really the second game that is like considered, I would consider a unironically good game. And I mean, I'm one of those people that actually is like, yeah, the third game was actually kind of all right. I mean, the ending was total bollocks, but
I refuse that olive branch, but that's a topic for a day when I really want to lose some sub count. So
I mean, I'm not in any hurry to ever go back and play Mother 3 again, but I'm just saying that, the quality of life improvements in combat that Mother 3 offered, there were a lot of really, really good ones. But yeah, it's not a game that I'm like, oh man, never mind the fact that it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm the leader of the village because I'm the tall one. And I could have stopped a lot of, confusion, but I just decided to not speak. Yeah, later, you can just go, fly off a
very short pier.
Take a long walk off a short pier. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Well, he's very tall. It may not slow him down much.
Yeah, he's like 3 stories tall. So
yeah, like legit. That's a visual gag with him. Is he's just that tall? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like this really, really tall, skinny guy. So
yeah, you see, a lot of these concepts require a lot of very precise movements to get done correctly. I've even seen people online argue that Ultraman Cosmos was a bit of a train wreck, and apparently there was some like behind-the-scenes meddling that gave the show trouble during production, which is why the series would ultimately take very different tones going forward after Cosmos. But the concept is very heartfelt. I think the idea of a hero of kindness who genuinely extinguishes every single option he has before resorting to violence is compelling, and it can be done well. And also, I think villains who are in themselves quite virtuous or maybe even have a better moral point than the hero does, that's compelling. That's really interesting. And concepts like the villain has an ideology or a philosophy or people that he cares about, like, that's good stuff. Especially, like we talked about earlier, if he's contrasted against those that don't.
And that's kind of why when you presented me with the conundrum of, I dare you to make your protagonist, be along those lines way back when. Yep. And I was like, I'll try and do it. And honestly, it was kind of hard because, well, first off, the more I dug into it, the setting I had built for myself is like very, very unkind. But at the same time, I feel like that makes it all the more poignant that Manfred, is, like, I woke up today and I chose kindness. Even though, everyone around me are amoral, psychopathic killers, I will not do that.
I can rise above. And that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was like stuff like that is, I think, what makes games like Faith, the Unholy Trinity, incredibly poignant. Because in the entire game, all your enemies are literal, actual demons from hell, and you're a guy with a bum knee and a cross. And the way you get the best ending is by saving the people you meet along the way. That gives you stakes and teeth to the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways of making a kind hero, especially if that hero is contrasted against very unkind circumstances, like Itaku just said.
Did the dev ever get back to you, by the way?
No, but I did actually see what could be a plausible explanation for the question I had anyway.
Oh, okay.
Because
I was legit, curious about that.
Yeah, there does seem to be an in-game explanation for that.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
No, really. I think most of what I want to get out was kind of out there. I didn't have a ton of examples, but I think the example I gave was pretty sufficient to the topic.
Yeah, no, definitely. Right, Master Itaku.
Right. My closing thoughts: Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger are good. Undertale's not good. Mother is debatably good.
Mother 2 is good. The others, not so much. All right, and that's going to bring our episode today to a close. This has been the Hipster Snack, as always, alongside Masters Clockwork.
Have a good one, guys.
And Itaku.
Sayonara.
And we will see you guys. We will see you guys in the next one.
Thank you for listening to the Tomodachi Brothers Review Podcast, produced and recorded by the Hipster Snack, Itaku, and Cog. Sound design and editing by executive producer Sean Taylor Brown with Cog Sound Engineering. Music written and performed by Sean Taylor Brown with Costas Vaz of Core Insight Studio on the drums. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.